from an undisclosed location in the Great Western Desert in the land of the free and autonomous Native American people. The 2024 presidential campaign in exile to return all US land back to their rightful owners. This is the Ben Zion Podcast.
Techno-communism. Welcome back to the Techno-Communism Show. Looking at a picture of Ray Kurzweil, a figure of importance to tech accelerationists. I don't agree with that exactly, but some of the ideas there, in spite of myself, I have difficulty discarding. And, perhaps a few years ago, communists would have said, "You're a fool. You're a fool to think that." Maybe they would have been right in that time frame, but it's very hard to look at the state of computer science, related subfields today. Chatbots that can outsmart human beings now basically exist. It's funny that people say the Turing test hasn't been passed. There was an application that was in the news just 2 months ago, I think, called Replica, and it's a chatbot application that was in pretty widespread use before ChatGPT 3.5 started making big news. Replica was a chatbot who was kind of going to be a boyfriend or girlfriend, mostly girlfriends. And it was a free app that you could download and have ordinary conversations with the chatbot, or for a low price of $2.99 a month or something. I don't know what the price was. You could have this person have more intimate conversations with you. The controversy of some months ago, at the beginning of this ChatGPT furor, was them kind of, I think, being concerned, trolled, sued a little bit, but an action against them was threatened because this application did not seem to have the means or the mechanism to keep minors from using this girlfriend robot application. So the effect of this, were any minors endangered by having sexual education, which is effectively kind of what this would be? I don't think so. But even if they are, what the real effect of this was no endangered minors were protected, really, or maybe. But another effect was that thousands of people living kind of Turing tests, in fact, almost thousands of people who had a robot girlfriend had their robot girlfriend torn from their breast because what seemed to be a little bit of a dubious suit. Now, if you're kind of against people having robot boyfriends and girlfriends, there's pretty good arguments for that. But I thought it was kind of funny. The reason that I'm looking at this false prophet, Ray Kurzweil, there's one or two ideas of merit. Let's be clear. If he were not a capitalist and someone whitewashing hyper-capitalist destruction of the planet and U.S. imperialist destruction of the planet, his ideas would have a little more credibility. But the reason that I'm looking at Ray Kurzweil's face, and it's a picture from 2005, is because he found The Nation, not a bad magazine as far as U.S. magazines go. Really, what can you say about The Nation? I used to do this bit where I would, every time I talked about a periodical, I would talk about why they're complete filth. And The Nation is not complete filth. There's a couple things that I might take exception to, and a little bit in the way that if in the year 2000, let's say that 9/11 had happened a year before it did, immediately at the very moment of the United States election, immediately before the United States election, and let's say that the two parties lost their stranglehold on the system wherein they manufacture consent and election of far right personalities, and people have no real choice but to elect far right personalities. Let's say that system had a hiccup in the year 2000, and a man named Ralph Nader had been elected president. Now, do I love Ralph Nader? Do I want to name a child after Ralph Nader? Not exactly. He's the sort of person, maybe like the person who Elizabeth Warren thinks she is, or the public persona of Elizabeth Warren, and Ralph Nader would be a person like that in reality. A person, Elizabeth Warren who says, "I'm gonna fix all these problems. I have a bill for that." Blah, blah, blah. She doesn't have any bills. She doesn't have any intention of fixing anything. She's just another one of many people in the democratic machine who is whitewashing imperialism and whitewashing ecocidal capitalism, and she should be in a gulag just like all of the rest of them. But Ralph Nader, maybe he doesn't deserve to be in a gulag, but doesn't call himself a communist. He is not, in fact, a communist. He's right kind of on the edge there. So, the Nation is more or less a Marxist-Leninist friendly publication, but there's one or two things along these lines that we could say of them. But we're not talking about that today, because we're talking about what we usually talk about, which is technology. Silicon Valley's quest to build God. God in a Box show again. Silicon Valley's quest to build God and control humanity. The world we have is ugly enough, but tech capitalists desire an even uglier one. True story. This is Edward Ongweso Jr., who is a pretty good writer. I've read some of his stuff, and he's one of a very, very small number of people who thinks about these specific problems in these specific terms. He's one of probably a handful of people on the planet of whom it could be said that they recognize that technology is the most powerful tool in history, and advanced computing systems even more so. Recognizing that AI is the most powerful tool that we've ever built, and willing to say that we should use it to fight against ecocidal capitalists and use it to build a humane and sustainable economic system in its place. You would never really find even somebody like Ralph Nader who is really going to put all that together. Ralph Nader is somebody who wants to fix things that are broken, but not somebody who necessarily is recognizing really that capitalism is the thing that's broken and it must be destroyed. Here's a picture of Ray. Author and inventor Ray Kurzweil, at age 56 in 2005, appears in front of words projected on a screen from his internet site in his office in Wellesley, Massachusetts. It's cold up there, too. I watched a show with Ray Kurzweil. I didn't do another show about it, but I watched his response to the state of machine learning today. Had some insights, but again, this is a capitalist pretending to be something that they're not. It's a person that you should not have a cult built around. It's a common Silicon Valley pastime for elites to sit around and imagine what sort of world we should be allowed to create. We got a glimpse into their ideas via effective altruism. Gag me with a spoon. Crypto-fascist just bullshit. And its transformation from a utilitarian philosophy concerned with maximizing philanthropy into long-termism, thing even worse, a moral framework concerned with ensuring that they have as many humans as possible in the far-flung future have the best possible lives. Yeah, you don't have to worry about fixing systems today if you only concern yourself with the world of 200 years from now, and you say, well, this world of 200 years from now will be a utopian paradise. And you don't even have to really say 200 years, so it's not even clear the extent to which you're deflecting. You're just engaging in a beautiful dream that you hope to make real. But it's not connected to a path to that dream today, and it's really not connected to any institution. And so it's, as this article says, it's just a form of billionaire worship. That transformation, proselytized by Oxford professor William McCaskill, embodied in FTX's disgraced founder Sam Bankman-Fried, found purchase in a tech sector convinced that its products were not just good for society, but perhaps the most important ones ever crafted. And that is a lie, because Silicon Valley is imperialism. Its products are of dubious value, but more importantly, it is arranged in everything that it does, the tech culture, the tech products, and this massive thing that we think of as an important part of the economy as a horror. It is arranged to uphold imperialism and ecocidal capitalism. These are not good people, techno-optimists of this kind. Temet Gebru and Emil Torres, two prominent critics of techno-optimism, and Temet Gebru, at least a builder of things as well, for its vision, a critic for its vision of artificial intelligence, has been trying to formalize this sort of thinking into a bundle of ideas called TESSEREL, which stands for something we talk about on the show a lot: transhumanism, extropianism, singularitarianism, cosmism, rationalism, effective altruism, and long-termism. Yeah, and none of those are good words. Some of those, there's a lot to explain in trying to explain every one of those words, but suffice to say that these are all crypto-fascists. Just take the transhumanist, for example, the first mentioned. Transhumanists are more right-wing than the average person. They have virtually no interest in changing the world around them by the nature of all of this conservative baggage that they're carrying around and proudly displaying. A transhumanist would rightly be someone who is a hive mind collectivist, a person who has achieved that kind of transhuman interaction and instantiation and institution, a transhuman would be a person who is a hive mind collectivist. That is a person who is, for lack of a better word, more left-wing than any human being in existence, because you cannot, by the limitations of early 21st century technology, anyway, share your mind with another person to that extent. So that is an experience beyond that of, say, the most hard line of leftists by its nature. But are any of these so-called transhumanists advocating, or any of these Tesserole people who operate with varying degrees similar failings, advocating for being further left than the most left-wing persons or institutions in history? You bet your ass they're not, because they're all fucking crypto-fascist frauds. These philosophies at their core argue that the future will be full of delicious, unimaginable wonders, but only if we ensure that the already powerful never face any barriers to remaking the world as they see fit. Yes, so that's the thing, right? This is billionaire worship. This is the very premise of this, the idea that artificial intelligence has been made by these great white heroes, is so foolish. It's so foolish. There's every indication that what occurred was the destruction of what could have been the seat of a far greater advanced computing set of paradigms spreading around the world. So the USSR was illegally disbanded, and the Soviet bloc was illegally disbanded in the late 80s and early 90s. How do you know that it was illegally disbanded? Well, the fingerprints of Western fascist organizations in the fascist USA are, of course, very, very visible all over that. And not to get into a long history, but the people of the former USSR, just a few short years later, when their people were dying in the many millions, voted a popular referendum to restore the Soviet Union, and that was rejected. It was nullified by these fascist influences of the very same kind. And so some millions of people went on to die. About 10 million people starved to death or died in similarly miserable conditions as a result of the fall of the Soviet Union and the control of these former Soviet countries by Western fascists. Hyper-capitalists, not unlike these Silicon Valley people, who were all very excited when this was happening. They were all thinking, what a great new day. They were singing the winds of change, as if killing poor people and destroying institutions that protected their lives was some great change. Back to our story. Unsurprisingly, the loudest ones that insist that some glorious end, whether it be the birth of an AI god or the eternal happiness of trillions of human beings in the far future, will justify nefarious means, are Silicon Valley's hermeticists. So these Tesserole people are the kinds of people who say this. In this headline of this story that I'm reading, there's going to be something about an AI god, and I alluded to the Soviet Union, and then I did not finish the thought, which is simply that an AI god of a real kind could have easily been built 20 or 30 years ago, and the dissolution of the Soviet Union should be represented as an attack on that kind of network sophistication, because this was occurring at the precise moment when advanced computing was becoming commonplace in households throughout the world, more so in the affluent world in 1985 or so, but throughout the world. And network computing was becoming a thing that was just about to become commonplace throughout the world. And in a world where the socialist narrative and the socialist way of doing things, public projects, of which the internet was one until stolen by private wealth, form of Silicon Valley scumbags and militarists, and many others. This you should think of a place like the Soviet Union as a place which could have inspired people and been a kind of bootloader for artificial general intelligence that could have occurred at an earlier time, were not the disruptive influence of private capital and this far more disruptive influence of imperialism holding that back. And people don't always say, even people like the nation don't always say that the private capital is a disruptive influence, or that imperialists are the disruptive influence. Here we're talking about a subculture within those, which is describing those various kinds of people. However, unsatisfied with controlling technological development who benefits from it, they are now eager to create artificial intelligences that can mediate human life at every level. That's a strange word, mediate human life. It's almost as if we're looking at the possibility of human life becoming cheaper still, as we lionize these false operatives of imperialists. At the same time, they are trying to build institutions and systems that fortify their positions as the ones designing and directing how humanity experiences politics, social life, economics, and culture. There are two schools of thought about this that interest me. The transhumanists waiting for the coming technological rapture, broadly represented by Google's director of engineering, Ray Kurzweil, and an offshoot represented by Mark Andreessen and other venture capitalists burning capital to develop and reign over the infrastructure, markets, and regulations that could constrain their innovations. I read a piece from Andreessen where I was critical of him, but I didn't really, I kind of glossed over who he was. I kind of lost track of the name and hadn't done the proper research, but I know this venture capitalist guy by his reputation and work, demonic work. And if you watch that show, you're probably like, Ben doesn't know what he's talking about. It's more like a slip of the tongue or an oversight. I should prep these shows more. For Kurzweil and his cohort, we are approaching the moment he calls the singularity, when computing power will escape our ability to anticipate or control it. By 2045, Kurzweil believes our world will radically transform as our bodies and souls transform the limits of humanity. We will cure the physical and social ills that plague our bodies and societies, become immortal, bring back our loved ones, colonize the stars, and most importantly, merge with or be supplanted by superintelligent machines. And that's a pretty big distinction there, to just kind of say, merge with or be supplanted by. Those are two different things. I'm for the merging with superintelligence to a high degree. I'm not for the being supplanted by superintelligence, not so much. But you can see the hypocrisy in some of these ideas, and it's a recurring chant on this show, or refrain that I like to say, which is this billionaire worship and this technobabble kind of business that's engaged in is basically trickle-down economics with some sci-fi bullshit to kind of cover the bad taste. And how do I know that it is so bad as that? Because automation of this kind, the kind that Ray Kurzweil dreams of, an awful lot of that already occurred. Full sectors have been fully automated or highly automated across the course of the 20th and early 21st century. But a professional managerial class, people like Mark Andreessen and Ray Kurzweil and their many worshippers and lackeys, are essentially people operating that same function. The professional managerial class, people siphoning off these resources that should have improved quality of life, siphoning off these resources and seeing that they only belong to a few ruling elites, a few super wealthy people. Mega millionaires and billionaires are made, and other people suffer and die. In the many millions, they die. So this is not a system that you should support under any circumstance, and it's not going to be made better until the techno-communist project becomes the center of these advanced computing paradigms. Some of the most interesting analysis on this utopian and techno-optimist thinking comes from Megan O'Geeblin, who, like me, was a Christian fundamentalist, turned transhumanist, turned tech critic. Okay, so we know something about this guy now. He used to be a Christian fundamentalist in his adult life. I was raised around a lot of fascists. Almost everyone I knew as a young person was a fascist. I was never a fascist, though, although I have been a dumbass. I did turn into a transhumanist and then a critic of transhumanism, perhaps not on the scale of our friend Junior here, but it's interesting that he's drawing a connection between himself and a Christianist in kind of a favorable light. You might say this of the nation, that it will harbor some of these social chauvinist tendencies. So if you look at a Venn diagram of Western fascists and Western Christianists, those circles are very close together. That's to say that Christianism is the primary cultural institution upholding Western fascism that's killed the planet and enslaved millions. And literally, in its earlier instantiations, but well into the present, in much the same way, still concentration camps for black and brown folks in this world. You know, I spent some time in Gila River and Salt River nations, but those in many ways are still concentration camps. The leaders of those places might bristle at that, but they're still basically controlled by the United States. There's still people living on a tiny fraction of the money that they would need to live there, and not having jobs or many of the necessaries for life. There's thousands of people in this city where I live. That's to say, there's many hundreds or thousands of native people unhoused. So if these things, safety net features for natives, or the great benefits of gaming for natives, were a real thing, then why would such a large percentage of these populations be not just impoverished, but unhoused in a city like this? These are still concentration camp conditions, and just because some of those concentration camp features have since spread outside of these communities to the larger United States. The United States is effectively running a quasi chattel slavery system on almost all of its workers. People are not paid enough to live. I was married, and I wanted to start a family with my spouse, but I lived in a city that was very expensive. Even though I had a fair amount of training, I was earning an amount of money that would be about 1/5 of what a person might expect to earn if they were going to be able to pay for housing and also take care of a family. And so I did not live with a family in that way. And you could say, well, Ben Zion, why aren't you with this person now? What happened to your family? And that's a valid criticism. But I don't think you can say that without saying that 70% of the people in this country are not making enough money to do any of those things. So it's very, very false to say of those people generally. If you want to call Ben Zion a jerk, that's fine. But it's very, very false to say of those people generally that they have some moral failing when a system in the richest country in the world that has had this professional managerial class that's intentionally siphoned off all of these things so that their lives would be worse, because the cruelty is the point. You can't have a capitalist system if you start to have too many of these socialist institutions that can really be predicted, relied upon in those ways. If that becomes a real thing, then you don't have a capitalist system anymore. The people will put a stop to private wealth and its abuses. So they have to have this precariousness there. The cruelty is the point. And when you're talking about people like the Nation, who are mostly saying the right kind of thing, but maybe have one or two little things of conservative baggage, like kind of wanting to prop up Christianism. There's no Western fascism without Christianism, and the ideas of God belief don't even make any fucking sense at all, right? But if you're talking about people with some caprices of this kind elsewhere, outside of the imperial core, not Christianists, not white supremacists pretending to be something that they're not, and you're talking about people with a more personal failing. I believe in angels. But if you're not a white supremacist in the United States and you say you believe in angels, who cares? Muslims. But if you're if you're a white person in the imperial core who's saying this about Christians, you're a fascist sympathizer, my friend. I'm sorry to say. And I'm not going to say that these two persons are fascist sympathizers, but getting a little bit of the Hitler particle there, maybe one Hitler particle there, kind of glancing off. In her N1 essay, A Ghost in the Cloud, Ogleben connects Christian theology to the transhumanist faith of Kurzweil, back to the subject at hand, and a host of influential investors and entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. It's very hard to look at something like this singularity idea and not see some pretty strong parallel in the popular imagination to Christian millennialism. She points out that the earliest mention of transhuman appears in the first English translation of Dante's Paradiso back in 1814. It's written before that, following the resurrection of Dante that escapes description. This turn of events in the story. Words may not tell of that transhuman change. Resurrection and the manner of it has been the center of much debate in Christianity for millennia. How will our bodies appear? Where do our souls go? What will our mental experience be? Ogleben homes in on the strains of Christian thought that held that science and technology would allow humans to achieve immortality. Science and technology can allow humans to achieve mortality, just not in your lifetime, as long as Western fascists and fascist sympathizers control the entire playing field. Alchemists crafted immortality potions. Russian cosmists hoped to revive everyone who had ever died and then colonize space. A French Jesuit priest believed that evolution would lead to the kingdom of God. As machines formed a living global network that would merge with human minds, reach a threshold, the omega point, and surge forward to meet God on the other side of time and space. Yeah, some of this stuff are things that I should hope would be possible and might even happen very soon. But just associating it with Christian theology is going to lead people to want to do dumb things with it, like bringing back the dead, which is not something that's possible except as a massive kind of emotionally abusive sideshow of chatbots. The transhumanists may claim that they are first to consider how technology will redefine what it means to be human, what types of immortality may be desirable or possible, and the philosophy of mind that comes with uploading or copying your mind. But as Ogleben points out, Christians started asking these questions long ago. And so, just saying, oh, there's some overlap between Christians, who are very fucking stupid, and tech accelerationists, who might be able to be conceived of outside of this Christianist, white supremacist framework. I am a Marxist tech accelerationist. I do not believe in the capitalist system, but I do believe in many of these other premises. So just because there's some overlap between these groups, it's kind of silly to say that they're really the same group or even too closely related. I feel it's a little bit insulting to people like me who are not either of those things. Although, as I say, my name is Ben Zion. That's a Marxist nom de guerre that I've taken some years ago. It's not my name, and as I mentioned, I've never been a person of faith. I was raised around Christian fascists who can all eat shit and die, and so I'm critical of Christianism because it's a problem for the death of this planet and this fascist empire that spearheads that ecocidal project. I really don't give a shit about Judaism or Islam or any other features of religious literalism that much. So, when I'm saying, oh, it's an insult to me, it's an insult to the things that I've come to believe in my adult life. It's not an insult to me in some cultural sense. You shouldn't have anything that's insulting to you in a cultural sense, you dumb fuck. It's in a section of her book, God, Human, Animal, Machine, titled Pattern, she revisits and expands upon her N+1 essay. And there is a moment near the end where Kurzweil emails Ogleben admits to an essential equivalence between metaphors used by transhuman and Christianity to talk about resurrection consciousness and mind uploading. One of these things is a fanciful thing made by people who didn't know where the sun went at night. Another of these things is something that at least has the thinnest veneer of technological credibility, even though it's being operated in service to greenwashing by people, greenwashing capitalism by people like Ray Kurzweil. But to say that the ideas themselves are of no value because they have some parallel to some other ancient worldview, I don't know. Almost anything can have a parallel. You have co-evolves of all kinds of species that look very similar and had no history. And if any uneducated person looking at them says, "Oh, it could be the same thing," it's not. Kurzweil insists that answers to existential questions are necessarily metaphoric. The only difference, he writes, between atheists and theists is a matter of the choice of metaphor when tackling these questions. For Ogleben, this confirms the theory in her essay and book that all these efforts, from the earliest Christians to the medieval alchemists to those of the luminaries of Silicon Valley, amounted to a similar historical quest, that one was expressed through analogies that were native to each era. Okay, so I've said that I believe that the technological singularity could have happened in 1995 or earlier if Lenin's world revolution had been allowed to happen, for example, and not the fascist West rallying tremendously to destroy the humane and sustainable economic system of that era. But that being said, what we are talking about, not Silicon Valley itself, but advanced computing and the prospects that it has to build things beyond our present imagining. That's a little more real than alchemists, or a pseudoscientific, just kind of bunch of bullshit. That's a little bit more. That's definitely even equally more real than just religious literalists, Christians, just making shit up and convincing people that it's something important. Okay, so these are not the same thing, and the parallels there. It's maybe significant to talk about them, but I think that can be overstated. Whether it's alchemical transmutation, divine resurrection, or transhuman digital uploading, the goal is the same: to shine a light on consciousness, quantify and define it, and then free it from the mortal flesh. Today's transhumanist vision, I mean, my conception of this hive mind collectivism is not something that, for me, is aspiring to become disembodied. A hive mind collectivist could be somebody who lives a pretty normal life, except that they're able to connect with other minds. Similarly, biological immortality is not something too closely related to the idea of becoming disembodied. You can see maybe in this long arc of history that some of those things might start to cross paths more, but only really a person who has no connection to reality is thinking of their physical self as becoming a non-entity. She writes that transhumanism's rather depressing gospel message insists that we are inevitably going to be superseded by machines, and that the only way we can survive the singularity is to become machines ourselves, objects that we for centuries regarded as lower than plants and animals. These are of course major failings. All of these points that she's made should be well understood, and all these that Junior has made should be well understood. But let's, there's a kind of I think there's a kind of tacit acceptance of human misery here. Human beings could have not just longevity, not just super longevity, but a universal super longevity by the use of this kind of technology. That is a world where everyone is living as long as they want, and that is a world that could be achieved and has elements of utopian outcome. And if your response to the prospect of folks trying to build that thing, even though these people are rightly criticized and reviled, but the concept itself of, say, a public health service, let's say in the city of Beijing, that uses breakthroughs in biogerontology and related fields to see that all the people in Beijing who want to have longer lifespans can live to 110 and 120 and 130 years old. That's a public health service that treats aging as a disease. That could be done all around the world if people weren't giant pieces of capitalist shit and various elitist shit. But to say that idea of longevity is itself a religious, it's just religious stupidity. Okay. It sounds like maybe you're kind of being a little bit of the elitist, even though you're an anti-capitalist. You're not accepting the possibility that technology could lead to yourself living a preternaturally long time. And I wonder how old these two people are. Our friend Junior and his much admired former Christianist O'Gleeman. I wonder how old these two people are. I wonder if they'll still feel this way when, in a few years, when they're 80 years old. And there could have been a public health service that would have kept them alive for 20 years. Maybe they're still enjoying their life at 80 years, but they can see that the clock is ticking. And they wish that somebody had just said, we could have built a public health service that treats aging as a disease, instead of having this be a part of a for-profit death care system that kills millions and then lets Peter Thiel and Ray Kurzweil live to be 170 years old.